Excellent. So Holmes, thank you so much for joining us. This is a bunch of fun. We're excited to hear more about your work, especially because Jacob and I have been playing with it a little bit over the last few days. And I think we have some questions like, how in the world is it so freaking fast? That doesn't make any sense. So we're looking forward to talking about it. So with that, the stage is yours.
All right. Thanks so much. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Desktop, share. And here we are. And slideshow. And all right, can you see my slide?
Yeah, let's go.
Great. Okay, so whoops. So I'm going to be presenting on Quiet, which is a Slack alternative for desktop and mobile built on Tor and IPFS. And our mission at Quiet is to build a Slack alternative that lets communities of people control all their own data without the hassle of running their own servers that they would get with tools like Mattermost or Matrix. The threat model we're building to is based on interviews we did with 18 activists and journalists and security researchers who advise activists and journalists. And the requirements that surfaced from those interviews are things like end-to-end encryption, of course, timed deletion or disappearing messages, resistance to account credential phishing, and above all, usability, because if you give activists and journalists secure tools that get in the way of their work, they will fall back to using insecure tools. So usability is super important too. The inspiration for Quiet comes from applications in the Tor ecosystem, like Ricochet, Ricochet Refresh, Kutch, and Onion Share. And what Quiet has in common with all these tools is that it uses Tor for connecting peers, for NAT hole punching, for end-to-end encryption, and for metadata protection. So like all these other tools, in Quiet, every device is an Onion service, and devices connect to each other's Onion services and share data exclusively over Tor. What makes Quiet unique, though, in relation to these other tools, is that Quiet uses closed IPFS networks and a CRDT, which is a tool for syncing without servers, in order to offer group chat with Slack-like channels, group file transfer for files of any size, for images, GIFs, whatever, and asynchronous messaging. So you're able to message users that are not currently online by relying on other people in your network, your community, to hold on to those messages for you. They're encrypted to the recipient, so other people in your community won't be able to read them, but you'll be able to send messages to users who aren't online. That's a feature that we haven't implemented yet, but it's envisioned in our design. So this approach, we think, will let us offer the convenience of Slack without relying on central servers at all. The way it works is that each community has its own IPFS network. Each member in the community knows each other's Tor Onion address and is able to connect. And they also know each other's public keys. They connect over Tor using libp2p and a modified libp2p WebSockets transport that we made, because libp2p doesn't yet have a first-class Tor transport. And yeah, libp2p is IPFS's peer-to-peer library, so it kind of just comes as part of IPFS, and the CRDT we're using OrbitDB. And so when peers connect, all connections are authenticated using a certificate from the community owner. And once they're connected, an IPFS-based CRDT called OrbitDB just starts syncing state. And that state could be messages or channels or new users or links to files or files themselves. Those are all getting synced actively as soon as people are connected in one of these networks. So just to break it down a little more, when you send a message, the message gets sent from a React or React Native front end to our backend, and OrbitDB adds it to its local state. OrbitDB computes a hash of the new state. It gossips that hash to peers over, and this is where libp2p gossip sub comes in. The gossip sub being the tool that kind of indirectly brought all of us together for this talk. But it's a project that's part of IPFS that's used by other projects, including Filecoin and Ethereum. And once peers see a head they do not recognize or they have not seen before coming to them across that gossip network, they attempt to fetch the data it points to and the data it points to, et cetera, using a protocol similar to BitTorrent that's part of IPFS. And again, all this happens within a private IPFS network. Most of the time when people think of IPFS, they think of a big global network, but all this is happening within a private IPFS network that corresponds to some community of users, and it's all happening over Tor. So the way joining a community works is that the invitation code, an owner of a community or creator of a community would give others an invitation code. The invitation code is just their onion address. The user would connect to the community owner and submit a certificate signing request. And the owner will return that certificate signing request signed along with some peer information that the user can use to connect to their first peer and begin syncing first the list of other peers and then all of the other data in the channel. The owner also adds the new peer's peer information to a table in OrbitDB so that that gets broadcast out to all existing users and eventually synced by all existing users. So after the user after this joining process is complete, all existing users know the necessary information for the new user and vice versa. So this is what it looks like. You paste in an invite code, you pick a username, and then you're in. The one catch in this process, and we're going to fix this soon, is that the community owner must be online in order for a new user to join a community. And this is actually a kind of onerous constraint, but we're going to fix it soon by either by having a shared onion address that all peers in the network are hosting, or by including many peer addresses in the invite code. Neither of those will be foolproof, but they will, in most cases, make it so you can join a community without the owner being online. So now I'm going to give a demo. Let's see. And these windows here. Folks, let's see. Maybe folks are muted. Okay. Please right now we have do quiet out my phone, just finishing. So let's see. Oh no, the screen share was like sorry, bubbles and chats you just should update. There it goes. Okay, cool. So I'm going to first just send a message from Alice to everybody. Great work. There, it worked. So the message is broadcast out, or the hash of the new state is broadcast out over Gossip Sub, and all peers fetch this message, and all this happened over Tor. So I'm going to reply on my phone here. Emoji of this sort.
Holmes, I'm not sure if this is for everyone, but with the phone, it seems to be freezing up. But if you want to share the invite code, I'd be happy to do the demo with you, for example.
Yeah, you're losing audio when you go to the phone, unfortunately.
there we go. So, the one more wait, and Max said, talk a little about calendaring, which is totally something I'm interested in. Oh, sorry. Let's see. So, first of all,
Yeah.
how long is that happening for? And can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. It's coming back. It's just that we get audio artifacts with the screen sharing, but Jacob and I can attest. We can attest that it is extremely fast, having used it. So, in fact, why don't I try screen sharing, and then Jacob can send me a message, and we'll show for you. Would that work?
That totally works. I'm also kind of furiously closing things to see about those things. But yeah, that totally works. Let's see. How far did I get into the demo before everything started dying?
The part where you tried to type the message.
Oh no! Wow. So that's tragic. All right.
No, but you already did answer one interesting question I had, which was when Max and I were setting up the quiet instance here. The first day I was trying to sign in and it was just hanging forever. It wouldn't let me get past picking a username. And I think that could have been because of what you were saying earlier, where Max might not have been online. I'm not sure if it was that or something else.
Yeah, there's a lot of polishing we haven't done to the onboarding process yet, where, yeah, there is that constraint where the owner has to be online. That's totally annoying and not really, that makes the app, I think, not ready for mass adoption of any kind, because it's too difficult to even communicate or conceptualize, I think, for most people. And then there's another issue with Tor onion address connection time. We're like working with Tor folks to mitigate. They had a big denial of service attack over the summer, and it's ongoing, and it's created some lags that disproportionately affect onion service connection times. So it could have also been that. But yeah, we're working on generally making it easier for people to join communities and yeah, addressing that Tor connection time issue.
So the speed is so good that as you can see, the conversation that Jacob and I had open already was about what the fuck, why is it so fast? But Jacob, if you send a message, we'll see it, pop up.
Oh, I really hope it pops up.
Yeah, so I sent it just now, so we'll see until it shows up on Max's screen. But yeah,
certainly when we were using it before, it was lightning fast. So at the very least, it can be lightning fast, even if in this particular moment it's not. Which then brings up the question: why can it be so fast? So I guess
Slack is all centralized. I'm shocked they'd be comparable if this one would be faster at all.
Well, so in terms of speed, Tor only adds Tor onion, when you access the Tor onion address, it's making 6 hops through the Tor network. I'm going to, and that doesn't necessarily, like Tor's design goal is low latency. They want to provide as much anonymity as they can without sacrificing latency more than they have to. So when it's working, it works very well. And when you're connected, especially in a community of multiple peers, if your connection to one peer is slow or interrupted, the connection gets sent around to many peers. So where it works best now is when there's a few people join. I'm also going to I might try again and disable my video and try the screen sharing again. I think that might work a bit better. Let's try that quickly.
I think the problem was more the phone is my guess.
Emulator, yeah.
Or whatever that is. I don't know if it was an emulator or screen sharing from your phone or what, but when you started messing with the phone, that's when the audio really went to shit.
Interesting. All right, I'll pull that out then. I'll just stop that.
Okay, we believe in you.
And I'm going to turn off my camera as well. One moment.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Here, are you able to see 2 quiet clients?
Yes, and we can hear you pretty clearly.
So I'm going to send a quick message. So I sort of already did my demo, so it's sitting right there. But going to send a message from the other. And let's say it should appear in a moment. There it is. I'm going to reply. Awesome, works. And you can see I already sent an image to myself. So Quiet works for sending images. I could send it again, it'll work again. And now I'll demo the feature that I was talking about making for, also Max, when you and I talked about like what would be ideal messaging app for a Boston computation club, we talked about calendar a little bit, but then we talked about, you said that it would be really awesome if your messaging app could render LaTeX, because sometimes you just want to express yourself in math, and Slack doesn't have that as a first-class feature. So so we went and added that feature. So let's see, I can do e to the I pi, and I'm just encapsulating it in double dollar signs the way you would in like Math Stack Exchange. E to the I pi equals -1. I think that's right, and I think that is a true statement. And when I send it here, that message is rendered in LaTeX here and is on user. So
already it's better than Slack.
Yeah, it's more complex. Awesome. I'm glad you dug it. So yeah, and things are really fast because we're making 6 hops over the Tor network, but Tor is pretty fast. And these, anyway, as long as the Tor comes up with connection times, and that's the problem. But it's something we're working with. We got together a group of people, a group of like other projects that use Tor in similar ways to contribute some ongoing donations to the Tor, so they can hire a couple of engineers to work on specifically on Onion services, specifically Onion service reliability and performance. And so that's something that's in the works now. So let's see, I'm gonna stop sharing and share my video back on. Cool, all right, so I'm glad we got to have a demo.
Especially the best feature.
And yeah, I could go through a few more slides with FAQs about like questions folks might have, or we could just
whatever you prefer is fine, Holmes. Whatever you prefer is fine.
Also, can I just say, I don't think we've ever had anyone implement something as a demo during our club event, so that was freaking awesome. You made Max's day with that one for sure.
Yeah. So we're, I mean, I think the where projects like Quiet are gonna succeed or fail is in whether they're able to find product market fit or not. And so I think the biggest challenge we face is finding some initial community that sees something in this tech that makes it worth it for them now to use and play with, so that we have a base to grow from. And I think a lot of that's what's missing from a lot of decentralized tech projects now. I think they're aiming for these extremely ambitious feature sets, but they're so far from use cases that it's difficult for them to get that guidance from actual users as to what they should focus on. And so yeah, it's something we're really focused on. So if
you're also open source, which is pretty crazy, because like I cannot add a feature to Slack, but I can add a feature to Quiet.
That's correct. And this week we had a few people start getting their local dev environment set up and start messing with Quiet. It's fairly easy to get started on desktop, especially on Linux. It's pretty much just like the basic flow for getting any node app running, like npm install, npm run start. There's an extra step because we use monorepo, but it's pretty straightforward. And once you are in it, it will look like a React app. And the mobile version is a little harder to get set up, but if you're familiar with React Native and Android development, should be straightforward.
So that maybe leads us straight into a good question, which is actually Jacob's question. I'm just going to plagiarize Jacob's question and ask it for him, which is, why is the app as large as it is? It's interesting that the package, like the number of bytes in Quiet, exceeds the amount in Slack, right? I think Jacob said by like a factor of 1.8 or something like that.
Yeah, it looks like, I think Slack is about 500 megabytes last time I checked, and then the initial download here was a gigabyte. And I thought it was fascinating. So I immediately thought like, wow, this is going to be kind of slow. I'm curious what this is about. And then it was super fast and seems better than Slack in a variety of ways. But then it was still surprising to me because you don't have like a giant team of probably a bunch of mediocre programmers adding a bunch of random features and building on top of it and making it bloated. So yeah, I'm curious about the size and like what that's about.
Yeah, so I think it's just someone else should jump in here because this might not be a true characterization, but I think it's just what happens when you jump in and use tools like Electron or React Native without optimizing for download size. Like if we wanted to try to make our initial download size smaller, and it's interesting that it gave you the impression that the app would be slow because, you know, so maybe we do want to do that because that's bad. I don't want to give you that impression, although I'm happy you were pleasantly surprised when it wasn't. Yeah. So, but if we want to make the app downloads smaller, I'm sure there are paths to doing that. One big thing is Electron. So there's a Rust alternative to Electron called Tauri that a lot of projects use. I think that's how you pronounce it, Tauri. And that, unlike Electron, just wraps like whatever the native browser engine, like whatever the OS's browser is, it wraps that. So it doesn't have to include the browser. You know, it's kind of wild that the point we're at now is that the best way to ship a cross-platform desktop app is to include Chromium. Yeah. And this is there are some, this is a compromise that has consequences and that are security relevant too. So it's something, there is a trade-off there that needs to be taken seriously. So Signal ships, you know, an Electron app on desktop. And I think there are many other security sensitive apps that do, but traditionally people were very cautious about this, and there are probably still some apps that use things like Qt, which are kind of very old school and constraining and not probably compatible with building like modern, well, I don't know, give you a much less easy path to building a modern application than Electron does. But they probably use Qt on desktop and sometimes even on mobile because of that issue that you know, it is a little unnerving to be shipping something as complex as Chromium just as your UI layer. But Electron has been very good lately about keeping up to date with Chromium and its security updates. The releases are very frequent, and so we're still sort of establishing the discipline in our team to stay up to date with the latest Electron releases, but that's something we're committed to doing. And you know, I think the situation makes it worth it. The current situation makes it worth it to use Electron.
I think I agree with that. And oh, sorry, Max. I'll comment when you get the question. I think, yeah, I mean, Chromium is a very tricky target for people to find bugs in, right? It's like they do happen, but it seems reasonable. And it's not like Qt is a great solution either. That's super buggy from the little I've used of it as well. I remember one time in like the basic Python library that wraps it, the way they calculated the size of the width of the image was different from their like resize by like 1 pixel. So whenever they're in a loop and you're trying to dynamically resize things, it just completely messes up and is not even in a stable state with the two functions. So it'll like slowly grow and lag your computer or whatever. So yeah, Electron, awesome.
Well, yeah, and so there's this this is maybe this connects with with another point that I think is important for folks to, which might be helpful for other people who are interested in building decentralized apps, is that when you're building user-facing decentralized apps, a lot of the time when people have questions about Quiet, they focus on some of the more like academically or intellectually interesting things like the, you know, Merkle-DAG, CRDT stuff, or protocols like GossipSub. But actually the complexity our team runs into and the difficulty our team runs into is just the day-to-day slog of deploying stuff for multiple platforms, especially on mobile, and especially using tools and approaches that are just a little bit different than the standard Web2 approach of like using, Firebase cloud messaging for notifications and using, using AWS for everything else. And it means that when you go searching for answer, it means that you're more likely to run into some problem, certain types of problems. And when you go searching for answers, there are fewer answers. So, and that makes everything costly. So what's cool about contributing to a project like Quiet is if you're interested in decentralized tech, you can kind of jump in and make headway with a feature, or start kind of learning the ins and outs of how the protocol works without, just being limited to making toy apps, or without confronting that or engaging with that slog yourself.
Holmes, how? Oh yeah, go for it, Ben.
I have a couple questions. So first, maybe I missed this, but how do you deal with clients, the recipient client being offline?
When and we haven't implemented this well we have. When someone is offline, and you're sending messages with other online users, you're adding all those messages to this Merkle's CRDT. And when the user that was offline comes back online and connects to at least one of those users, they will see that there are messages that were sent while they were gone, and they'll pull down those messages quickly and display them to the user. That's how it works for like group chat. So users get that like Slack-like experience of coming online and just seeing what they missed, rather than the IRC or the old school IRC experience of needing to be online all the time in order to see what's happening. Right. And so what we're going to do for DMs is, because it's a closed community, and there's some basic trust within the community, peers can trust each other to some degree, so that peers can offer storage. Sorry, I'm just going to get some water, getting hoarse. So peers can offer storage to other people in their community. And when you send a DM to somebody else, that DM can be synced to other community members who are online. And if you go offline and then the person you sent it to comes on later, they can pull it down from the set of DMs that are from the set of their DMs and read it as they would any other message.
So do you have plans to add another layer of encryption? Because you would want only the sender and recipient to have shared keys in that case.
Yeah. So when we add when we implement DMs, and we actually did implement DMs and ripped it out when we started working on mobile to simplify things, and we're going to add it back in. But yeah, the way DMs are implemented is that each user does a key exchange with another user when they first start DMing, and they establish a shared secret, and then do symmetric encryption based on that shared secret to communicate from that point forward. We're not doing anything like double ratchet yet, but it's something you could do in the future. In an ideal world, we would use some type of CRDT stack that offered that as a feature, because users are also going to want private groups and then private group messaging, or another dimension. The two other wrinkles on message layer encryption are private groups and multi-device support. So in both of those cases, you need some type of thought through mechanism to make it so that you can send a message, so that you can add and remove people from private groups and update keys, and so that you can also add and remove people who might have multiple devices attached to their identity, and ensure that those new devices either get access or get denied access when that person's added or removed. And there's some people in the IPFS ecosystem working on stuff that would do that, and there's some like general kind of local first folks working on it in like a general kind of like network stack agnostic or CRDT agnostic, like local first kind of way. Yeah, we're going to have to kind of survey what options are available, what libraries are available, and pick something and go with it.
Cool, thanks. And do you have anything to deal with managing the ordering of messages, like if concurrent messages are sent or messages that are sent nearby in time?
Yeah, so ordering is something that CRDTs give you a partial solution for and not a complete solution. And a complete solution, if you figure out how, a complete solution, well, I guess it is to the extent that the number of users is bounded, we could use some kind of consensus algorithm, but that's probably brittle. So what we're doing right now is using the CRDT, which means that, let's see, you can prove that one message was sent after another message. That's what the CRDT gives you for ordering. So it gives you this like kind of causal ordering, but it doesn't stop somebody from not taking a message. Sorry?
Partial ordering, I believe is the term, as opposed to total ordering.
Yeah. So someone can still backdate messages, and someone could send a message far in the future potentially. And so you need, and then someone could send, someone could spoof a timestamp potentially. So there's some like process we can go through to use both timestamps and the ordering provided by the CRDT to approximate something. Another thing the CRDT gives you is at least it guarantees that all users are seeing the same thing, that you get out of the box, so that at least there's agreement among peers about what they're seeing. An attacker couldn't like make it so that somebody sees one version of the conversation and somebody else sees another and doesn't even know what's happening when someone else complains about it or something. And yeah, the approach, I think, to get like strict ordering that is probably most compatible with tools like this is one that this project Ceramic is doing, where they anchor like CRDT entries to like blocks in the Ethereum blockchain or in the blockchain of your choice. So they'll put like a Merkle root every block. They'll put a Merkle root in that that lets you prove that and they'll give you a proof that shows that your message is part of that Merkle root. And you can do that for like many different, So that approach, but then you're depending on an external API that's sort of trusted in some way.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
What is the financial plan for Quiet?
Cool. Yeah, that was one of my. I actually had a slide about that, but I'll just tell you. So our plan is to be a business. I've run nonprofits. I've run tech nonprofits, like trying to build tech for some social objective before, and you get into real trouble sometimes when you achieve some levels of success, because you can fundraise at a certain level from the foundation world, but once you have some traction and need to fundraise at 3x or 10x as much, there isn't really a path to do that for all but the most unusual projects. So it makes sense, I think, for it to be a business. Our plan is to charge for nice to have features in the official builds of Quiet. So the features would still be in the open source repo. People could build them themselves if they wanted to, but if you use our builds, those features will be locked to paying users. And in terms of what features we might offer for payment, what the offering would be, we're going to try to base it on what Slack and Discord are doing at first, and then experiment based on that. So Slack is offering, some nice to have features for per seat per month, and Discord is offering features like, you pay to give your community additional capabilities, or your community gets additional capabilities if there's enough paying members. So some mix of those things probably, and then maybe if there are features that we can only offer using a central server, for example, push notifications on iOS might be something we can only do with a central server. We might charge for those features too, or for like some usage level of those features.
So something kind of like how Sublime Text tells me to please give them $80 every few years, and I'm like, sure, whatever, go away, and I give them $80, and they're happy. But like, I don't technically need to. I could use the product without doing that. But it's people are going to pay for the convenience, and also because they want to support the project. Yeah,
and also, I think offering builds for all devices is something of a hassle, especially dealing with app stores and things like that. So it's non-trivial for someone to do that. And also, if you're, if the value prop here is privacy and security, you are probably going to want to get the builds made by the actual authors of the software rather than somebody else.
Yeah, that's true.
So
yeah, I'll definitely pay money to not build my own software. I have another question for you. Have you considered, so when when people are sending messages, I assume that, or like you said before, when somebody's offline, the message is stored with other peers in their group. Is there any thought about expanding that to include like anyone using the service? So instead of being like a bunch of private swarms, you have like a global swarm.
yeah, so I think the tough thing there is like you would need some well, it seems like it's, well, if you did it that way, what would be your solution to like Sybil spamming type attacks, or to people just kind of overusing that shared resource? Because yeah.
Well, I mean, they would only be able to forward your encrypted message, right? So like anything that they send to you, they don't have a shared key.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, somebody could just say, here are a ton of messages that I really need to send to every other user in the system, or to many other users, even just to myself. So someone could just use it as like a backup for their own data. So they send to another, account they've created. They just send a ton of messages, or they create many accounts and send a ton of messages. It seems like it'd be difficult to, I mean, it creates some ambiguity about who you're offering data to and what the bounds on that are.
Yeah,
it certainly would be desirable. Sorry?
I was going to say it's probably in violation of like GDPR or some policy like that. At least you have to think about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the place where I most want some type of global network is to facilitate joining communities. That's where we are really feeling pain now, and where we could have something better than Tor. For example, so the way Hypercore is a peer-to-peer stack that works in such a way that you can create some type of document or resource. I think it's called like a core or something, and you get a identifier for it, and then a key pair, and you can look up that data on the global DHT without revealing the data itself. You do reveal that you're looking for it, but you can look up that data on a global DHT and find other peers that are also interested in that data, so then you can connect to them directly. So like it sort of works like a DHT BitTorrent tracker or something. That would be really useful for joining communities. And the reason why we're trying to get away without it for now is that it creates more attack surface in terms of like an attacker figuring out what people are interested in what communities someone is interested in, or linking someone's identity in one community to their identity in another community. And it also kind of kicks the can on the road for like denial of service attack problems, because it creates another global network that anybody can join and mess with you on. Whereas if we're able to just use Tor as our way to get connected to other peers, then there could be denial of service attacks at the Tor layer, but after that, every quiet community is going to be its own. It is not going to be exposed to denial of service attacks within like the space of quiet, if that makes sense. They won't, because because attackers simply won't know their onion addresses, won't have any way to contact them, connect with them. So that's how we're thinking about that.
Ben, you have any more follow-up questions, or can I change this in a different direction and ask something else?
Go for it.
Okay, so Holmes, I missed like the first 2 minutes, so apologize if this was in there, but I'm curious what the threat model for quiet kind of is. For example, I have one friend who works at Discord, and they basically have everything unencrypted, right? So it's already breaking a lot of the guarantees Quiet is trying to go to, but at the same time, they've had a lot of different like dangerous hate speech groups. They have to take down a bunch of malware servers. There's a lot of activity happening on Discord that they'd rather not be affiliated with. And they use this lack of encryption to kind of enforce that. So I'm curious, if a similar thing were to happen on some Quiet servers, what would your perspective on that be? Is that something that's kind of out of your hands on Tor? That's how it's designed. It's worth it to protect journalists and other people who might need this as a private service. I'm curious how you kind of philosophically think about that type of issue.
Yeah. So I think we have a strong opinion about who we want to use Quiet, and I think Quiet is built for people who value decentralization because of where it takes the world, and who care about freedom and privacy, and care about those things because of the broad political implications of them and because of the deep values associated with them. And so that's who we want to use Quiet. So we're not going to be, just kind of like hustling for product market fit with whoever. And if people are doing stuff that we're not into, we might not reply to their support requests. We're not going to be like, hey, use this cool thing. It's awesome for, not getting caught. Like, that's just not something we're going to do. And I think it's important to remember that even tools like Tor in this context do not provide anyone like absolute protection against being held accountable by society. They're just, the current state of InfoSec does not, barely at least, permit such a level of protection, and Tor certainly doesn't. So there is accountability for people, and Quiet just isn't the kind of thing someone should. Quiet is not built so that people who are doing bad things can get away with it. Quiet is built so that people doing good things can continue doing that for more time without getting disrupted. Like, that's the most you can do with tools like this. And people who think they're going to pick up a tool like this and run with it and never get caught for doing something severely antisocial are just wrong. Society is going to catch up with them. But I think Quiet's positioning is, as you said, it is similar to the positioning of the Tor project, or to Signal for that matter, where we believe that we should not be in control of people's communication. That is not something that a platform or software maker should be in the business of doing, because it kind of messes up society in different ways. And so we are building a tool that just doesn't give us that power. And we're also building a tool in a way, because it's free and open source software, that, even if we did assert that power, someone could say, hey, no fair, and take that power away from us. And that's what's cool about free and open source software, is that it makes that, even that type of decision, it makes that a functional, like, it makes that highly democratic, because there's always that freedom to exit. And more broadly, I think that's why one of the kind of meta mission of Quiet is to try to make it so that it's easier, so that there's a broader class of applications that can be built with pure free software without dependence on a server, and maintained by volunteer communities, or even by individual developers, doing it as a side project, as simply as they would maintain like a popular open source library or something like that. Like, right now, you cannot, as an individual or as a volunteer organization, maintain and operate Signal at the scale it's operating at, for a number of reasons. But you can maintain a popular open source library. Is there a way that we can make it so that, like, the tools most people are using day to day can be maintained just as easily as popular open source libraries? Like, that would be a really cool world if that became possible. And so that's kind of what we're pushing towards.
Cool, thank you. That makes sense. I've got another question. That was a good answer, by the way. It's this very thorny spot, and interesting to hear that when Discord doesn't do their encryption, we hear about all these malware servers, but when something like Signal or other secure apps have all this protection, we don't hear about malware servers, and there very well could be ones there, except they're saying, hey, that's sort of not our mission. So
Yeah.
that makes
And
sense.
I think it's a trap. The thing that the road that Discord is going down ultimately is a trap also. And I feel fairly strongly about this because I think that when you start down that road, you get led down it because there are some things where you can say, yes, this is definitely bad. And you can say, everyone agrees that this is bad. This is definitely bad. But then you start getting into things that everyone in your circle might agree is bad, or everyone at your company might agree is bad, but where you might be wrong. And you might be the bad one in censoring it. And there just isn't, I've been working in political work. My previous role was as an activist, running the activism organization Fight for the Future, which I co-founded or was co-running and co-founded with some close friends. I'm on the board of it now. And, when you're in this long enough, you see enough things where organizations that have all the institutional weight in the world to make some determination about truth try their best and fail miserably, whether it's the New York Times or the ACLU or this government or that institution or the other. It's just really, really hard. And ultimately, I think we need to create a world that's just radically pluralist, where people have the agency to discuss ideas with other people who consent to discussing them, and then in broader public spheres, hash that stuff out within the frameworks and institutions that we create. Like, we just need to be ready to dive into radical pluralism. And anyway, I think organizations like Discord or Facebook that start down the road of trying to determine what's good and what's bad content-wise are digging themselves a hole, or sort of like painting themselves into a corner, because it will never be possible. And yet the more they try, the more people will expect them to. And it's just going to unravel and lead to massive distrust in these institutions until they say, look, we're giving the power to people. We believe in pluralism too.
Awesome. That's a super interesting philosophical take on it. Thank you for that. So do other people have questions, or should I go with another one in another direction?
I just will say, I like that response to it. I haven't heard many folks talk about that type of stuff in the tech land, but I'm not as deep in it as you are, so.
Yeah, so my other question, I agree with Herbert, by the way. It's nice to have a perspective like that isn't free speech maximalism. Also, here's a bunch of fake news and anti-Semitic things, or not anti-Semitic, but anti-gay and other stuff. But anyway, so why do you think Slack and Discord have had such wild success? I think for Discord, the part that strikes out to me is, during COVID, they were really convenient for audio and good at that when a lot of places weren't. And for Slack, I don't really know what to say based on timing, because they just seem exceptionally mediocre. And yeah, I'm curious why the landscape ended up this way, in your opinion.
Okay. Well, so I was around when Slack first launched, and before, so let's see, before that we used in the mid 2000s, we used IRC as our internal chat. And then, if you wanted, that thing I mentioned, that issue with IRC, if you wanted to have persistence or be able to see what happened while you were offline, you needed to set up some server-based IRC and access it. There was some tool for just like running in a terminal that would stay on all the time, and you could just kind of come back to it. And you start stringing together these tools. It's kind of annoying. Then mobile comes along and you want it on your phone, and now you have to run an always-on IRC service on your phone, or use some somewhat centralized service for that. And you're patching together these different tools. Right before we used Slack at Fight for the Future, we used Grove, which was like IRC plus a web front end. They didn't have mobile apps, but like at least they had some things that like the person on your team who didn't want to set up an IRC client could just like go to a website and be normal and send messages and see what everyone else is saying. But it was funny where they just didn't go quite as far into the like mobile first direction that Slack went in. Or I don't even know if Slack is mobile first, but like mobile positive, like. And so yeah, when Slack came out, I think it was just the thing every team needed that they didn't know they needed. I mean, a lot of teams didn't even know they needed something like IRC because it was too hard for them to set it up, and they were just using email, and that's stupid. Like if you have a bunch of people working together synchronously, you need some space where someone can say, hey, what about this thing? And, get a response. So Slack gave people that. And yeah, I think it just caught on like wildfire because it caught like wildfire because it just filled that slot. And the initial users were mostly small startups, although ultimately I think Slack's kind of hidden story is that most of its adoption does not come through word of mouth. It's mostly like heavily a sales-based business. And their sales team is really significant. So then Discord found a niche with gamers was the initial story. And then I think especially grew on Reddit. And gamers have a somewhat unique set of feature requirements. I like live audio. And they really honed in on those, and they were building for themselves, like as gamers. And there was a gap there that Skype wasn't really filling. So they found an initial niche. So and then I think there's a story of how they got started, and then sort of like how this stuff ends up snowballing and playing out. And I think in the way it plays out, there's space and opportunity for different types of tools, because Slack is still very oriented towards organizations that are hierarchically or centrally organized and that make money. It's not really a great tool for just like ad hoc community. And Discord is very, very still, even though, elementary schools are using it, during COVID or something, Discord is very still gamer oriented in its aesthetic. And I think the big complaint I hear about Discord a lot is how it just grabs your attention. It's like very optimized for just like being loud and grabbing your attention, and people who aren't used to games find that annoying ultimately, like as their main work tool, and it becomes hard to find things, and people like there's some kind of fit there that's happening. And so I think there is an opportunity for something that's more of a generic, like, okay, what's the new like real-time, version of a listserv that every community is going to have that doesn't come with this baggage that Slack and Discord come with. And I think we can build that potentially, but to get to it, we need some initial niche that's really opinionated about like what they need and isn't, just gets where we can be better than anything else for them.
That's awesome. So I again have one more question. Other people can jump in and interrupt at all times, but I know a lot of people who absolutely, with every fiber of their being, despise Slack and Microsoft Teams. And a lot of it's because of how that's done with work culture and remote things, and how you need to make sure your user thing is not yellow or red, it's green whenever your work hours are happening. Do you think that people hate Slack because of how their workplace is organized, or because of some societal reason, or are there technical design things that Quiet can do to be something people enjoy using if it were in an organization like a job?
I mean, I think definitely part of it is just, what it created an expectation for constant attention that I think is probably destructive to some people's work. But I think as an organization, like as a manager, the way we address that is by giving people, like encouraging people to have heads down time in the morning, or taking heads down time in the morning, making it totally acceptable to put your Slack on away, and say what you're working on, go heads down, and if someone needs to get in touch with you, they send you a calendar invite for some time, and you either accept it or bump it forward in the day. There's a lot of ways to like give other people access to you and your attention without giving them kind of that expectation of an instant response. And ultimately you have to do that if you want to get anything done in most roles. So I think organizations do, if people hate the absence of that, they're hating a failure of their organization to some degree, if their organization hasn't implemented those things. But it does kind of lean things that direction. It definitely does intrude into people's like, non-work life by being reachable in that way. But sometimes you need that for some types of work. And I think for technical things, though, there is one thing that sticks out. So what's the name of it? Zulip is a tool that achieves some like space between the synchronicity of the like like synchronousness of Slack or IRC and the threadedness of like email, where you can send an instant message, but it's all organized in threads. And so it's easier to come back and see what you missed than it would be in Slack. And some people love it. It's usually engineers who love it because it's very hierarchically organized, I think. And it's like, it makes more sense to people who are used to thinking in like nested structures. But I mean, that's me speculating, but it seems like that's where their traction is. But some people really, really love Zulip. I think we're still like kind of listening to people on threads. Like we don't have threads, but I could see us going the direction of threads. Or if we get traction with like general kind of mainstream community groups, it might make sense to have something like top level post and plus replies, the way like Nextdoor or Facebook groups does. So I think threadedness can help make Slack a little less violently like needing your attention all the time. And that's something I'm interested in, but we don't have any like commitment to any path just yet.
That's awesome. That's a great answer.
Yeah, I would say that threadedness. So I use Slack for a nonprofit that I'm a part of, and that's like the threadedness is very important to keep us organized, because if we didn't use that, we would have to go to like Asana or Trello and have other organization methods for that. But in the threads, we can just be like, here's the agenda is a thread. So
that's cool. Yeah, it lets you kind of create documents almost. There's also something cool where there's this relationship between like your messaging app and your documentation, and messaging is kind of where documentation happens organically. But then there's this question of like how that gets turned into your book, of like what is important, and then how that book is linked back to conversations so you can see everything in context. And that's something people are talking about. I'm also really interested in. Though I think a lot of this like is either going to, for us, it's either going to be driven by like individual users saying they want things, or you know, us getting through this initial phase of proving that we can make something, like getting through the user onboarding work that we're planning for the next few months, getting to a better place on iOS. Right now, like we just now have builds working for iOS, but they don't run in the background and they're not in test flight yet, even let alone the App Store. So there's some preliminary stuff that we're gonna be working on for the next like half year, and then, you know, then things might open up where we could think about like our like product vision at that level a bit more. But and hopefully we'll have more information about what our people want at that point.
We should probably wrap up because we've taken an hour of your time, but I'll definitely tell you that the 4 people in this call want LaTeX, and we're thrilled that you added that. That's super, super cool. And I think in general, as a theme, you certainly have a receptive audience in the sense that like math and CS kind of people tend to dislike that products like Slack and Teams are really heavy on the business oriented features that we don't give a fuck about, like integration of some dumb time tracking app to make sure I'm a slave to my boss. But then they like don't have any of the features that we would actually want, like having good code highlighting or having, you know, LaTeX integration or stuff like that, right? So I like this idea of having something that has an open source flavor to it and also like integrates a bunch of features that are actually useful to technical people.
To corroborate that point before we go, I think it's also, I don't know how large that market is compared to other ones, but I do know that it's much easier to tell them about Tor and explain how that works and why it's technically better than some of the things Slack is doing too.
Yeah.
Comments.
Yeah, no, it'd be, I mean, I'm really interested in exploring like communities like yours as an initial niche, and the best way to start that, I think, is to see if you all want to use it and to try to make it good for you over the next few months. The LaTeX feature is still in our develop branch. We haven't released it yet, but we will be soon. And if you want to try it out or run a version that has it, you can run from source.
Sounds good. Cool. Well, we'll continue to play with the app. Jacob and I have been messaging on it, and certainly other people in the group can join the room and chat. And I think when it gets close to, you know, feature parity on the basic features, you know, there's a decent chance that we would switch if it had things like LaTeX built in, because that would be pretty baller. So we'll definitely stay in touch. Thank you so much, Holmes.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.